Okay, I call this meeting of the Election Commission to order. Can we have the roll call?
Of course. Bonnie?
Here.
Sue?
Here.
Gwen?
Here.
Joyce?
Here.
Vicky?
Here.
Petey?
Here.
Jim?
Present.
Barbara?
Here.
Madam Chair, you have a quorum?
All right. First order of the agenda is old business. Do we have any? Looks like we have none.
Well, we're supposed to send something to you, Amanda. Is
So-
that old or new?
That's new business.
Okay.
And I added your item to the agenda.
Okay. So if no old business, we'll move on to new business. The first one is verifying voter eligibility, the identifiers.
And if I may, specifically, I received an email from Bonnie wishing to discuss this issue at this meeting. We had 6 voters who had requested a ballot by mail and who had not put their identifier on the envelope. It specifically does not say in Anchorage Municipal Code that you could reject or collect those, or accept those, excuse me. The commission did make the decision this year to accept those votes by verifying that they had provided an identifier on their request for a ballot by mail. So that's the background.
My concern was it's hard to see if it's the right signature, and I'm not a handwriter, reader, etc. And I just thought we go through so many steps to make sure that it's in REMS, that we verify the people, that I just thought it was a bag of worms. I don't know how anybody else felt, except that I do want as many votes as possible. That was the reason.
Anybody have any thoughts on that?
Refresh my memory. Earlier we were just okay with signature, and if we didn't recognize it, we would deny.
No, so this is a separate issue. In the past, any voter who requested an absentee by mail ballot and who did not provide an identifier on the envelope that they returned it in, those votes did not count. This year, the commission looked at the application that the voter submitted and determined that the voter had provided an identifier when requesting the ballot, and made the determination that Anchorage Municipal Code doesn't require it on the return ballot envelope, and so you accepted those votes.
But what do you want to have done, Bonnie? You want it to be in code, or you just want to have it verbalized?
I just didn't feel comfortable doing it, so it's up to the rest of you if you feel comfortable.
Go ahead.
Well, I think I heard what you said relating to handwriting. That a signature that was on the application form may not have looked like the one that was on the envelope. Is that what you're saying? And therefore, you couldn't be sure if it's the same person.
Well, yes, and that we have to go back and find all the envelopes and compare them. It just...
Well, the hard thing is to get that application from someplace else in the city hall.
So what happened this year is we had determined that there was these 6 that did not provide an identifier. We determined that it did not say in municipal code that an identifier was required on when it was the ballot was submitted, and we went and pulled those applications and pulled the identifier from there. And one step that the commission did was they did look at the signature on the ballot envelope along with the signature on the application. And I remember at our meeting there was a little concern that there was one signature of one voter that potentially did not look the same between the application and the ballot envelope. And so then there was a conversation of, well, do you accept these other ones or do you not accept these other ones? Specifically because that one signature looked a little different between the 2. And so that, I think, is maybe more where the concern is coming from, is that the commission then became in this position where they were reviewing signatures instead of just confirming that there was already an identifier.
Yes.
I'd like to just kind of contribute to the overall information of our group. Do you remember that we checked that in another year? Because when they have an application to receive a mail, it goes through the same things that we do to check verification. The team checks it on VREMS. They make sure that it's all correct and all in order before they put it on a spreadsheet that goes up to the mailroom crew. I mean, mailroom is not the proper one.
The by mail board.
By mail board. And they check it, again, not all of them or anything like that, but anything they have a question on, they check that as well.
Okay.
So it's pretty, I feel that once they have that application in and it's approved and the stuff is set out, that's,
Okay.
certainly more than in any other procedure we do.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
a good point. There is a series of checks and balances along the way before we even send out the ballot to the voter.
Okay.
So
I think it should state somewhere so that it is standardized, so that in future commissions, if they make a decision against this, previous years, somebody may have been disfranchised by, or been franchised when they should have been disenfranchised by the decisions we made. So I think that maybe somewhere along the line it should be spelled out. I forget though, on the ballot envelope, does it say must
Yeah, it does.
above that?
Yeah.
It does, yeah.
I think because I came up for the mail one day, I think, and the mailroom called me on that,
yeah.
and it was controversial, and you came in just in time for the rescue at that point. But just for consistency's sake,
Does it say must?
yeah,
Yes.
right.
Yes.
Just for consistency's sake, it probably should be.
So that was part of the conversation that we did have with the by mail board. Does the envelope trump municipal code? So Anchorage Municipal Code does not say it's required, and it does say must on the envelope. But as you're aware, with other things that we use throughout the election process, they say must when they're not all musts. So there is, and I recognize
It's
that
an attempt to encourage the voter to take it very seriously and not miss that step. That doesn't
Yeah.
mean
Yeah.
it's fatal. The thing is, if they run the risk, that if they don't, that they get into the situation of what we saw this year is how do you decipher whether the signatures are close enough, and does the commission feel comfortable with saying, yeah, it's the same person?
Well, I guess I'd like to say, too, I feel the same way Bonnie Lynn does, is that I don't feel that that the commission is in the area, and I think it came up during our canvas meeting, to be able to discern whether that signature is the same as this one. And I know sometimes I write my signature different as well.
Mm-hmm.
So if the municipal code doesn't require an identifier, and bear with me if I don't recall, but what does the municipal code require in order for the envelope to be accepted? So I don't know off the top of my head. I know we checked all these things. We checked, identifiers and the date of birth and all that sort of stuff.
It'd be nice to have it written down.
It is, and Dennis is turning to his code now, but I do know that a signature is required and a witnessing affidavit is required, because we did have votes that did not count because they weren't signed
witnessed.
or they weren't witnessed.
Remember that one.
So, if I might, in addition to the timing, it was a postmark, did it come in on time, that sort of thing. It says that the witness or official has to attest. The critical thing that we debated back and forth was this: the voter failed to properly execute the certificate on the envelope, and we decided to execute the certificate means they had to sign it, and that there was some latitude there with respect to whether an identifier was required.
Is that in the code?
In the code, the voter failed to properly execute the certificate on the envelope.
I know, but does it define what execute means in the code is what I meant.
No, we had to.
We had to check the legal stuff on that one.
Definition.
So,
Which means
I
sign.
can't recall, do we have a legal opinion from you on that?
Yes, but I don't know if it was written.
you want me to go look really
email,
quick?
or how do we do that? But yes.
Did.
I remember that. I especially remember from the year before.
Well, I think if that's the way it's going to be, the term execute is going to be determined, then I do think it should either be in code or we should have something in writing for a legal opinion. Because I agree with, I think it was Sue that just said or someone said that we have to have consistency from year to year. And if it isn't in writing, I don't always feel that consistency is there.
Yeah, so right now our legal opinion is that execute does not require the identifiers. So if you want to recommend that at least one identifier be provided, we want to add that in.
Okay.
Or just that, is it written that they have to have a signature then? Or that, you know what I mean, that attachment to it?
Well, my opinion?
Yeah.
She's going to go get it.
Okay.
Because I can't remember if it was by email or if it was a memo.
Okay.
And so is that something that has been, I know Gwen referred to a couple other years, is that something that's been determined in previous years? Is that what we're saying? Well, I think if it's such an important point that it would get to come to the Canvas board, where the Canvas would have to determine whether that is, considered something that's going to be accepted or not. And I think it should be in code, because it's not going to change. What that means.
Right. It would be a couple ways you could do this. You could better define what executing the certificate means, and you could decide to say that that's just a signature, or that it's a signature and at least one identifier.
And do you know what the history is as to why there is an identifier required on the local level than there is on the state level?
I mean, I
Okay.
think basically at the local level, we just haven't had this close to scrutiny until the big blow up in 2012, and all of a sudden we're examining everything we do, and we're getting better at it and realizing there's a lot of little things that we probably haven't addressed before, at least not in the full sense that I'm aware of.
So my understanding right now is that the voter's identifier is not required by so I would just like to say that I think it should be off the envelope.
That's going to be my next
That's
comment.
I think if it's required, then it should remain on there, and then we can say, okay, that's the law. It has to be they both have to be there. But if it's not required, then it shouldn't be on.
I'd like to point out that their identifier is required on this envelope when they apply for a mail-in.
But not on the one not on the one that's sent in. I mean, that's
true.
the ballot. So
But
that's what I was meaning.
Okay,
Yeah.
but I'd also like to offer a differing opinion, because so many of the ones that we find, like another one is they must provide their birth date. Man, how many? Hundreds do we find? I mean, after trying 12 times through the various channels, it's the birth date that gets it. So even though must does not really mean must, I would hate to take it off the envelope, because that is so effective in our finding it. And for that reason, the identifier, I feel the same way
I
on
would
that.
after that, because I think what might happen is if you don't have the identifiers on there, you're going to have a whole lot more where you're trying to figure out what the signatures match.
So then
let's
let's add in identifier to the code then, so that we don't have this all the time, because it's so open to interpretation kind of thing, and you're going to have.
If I could just interject for a sec, I would say too that since Amanda and Barbara have been talking about going to all mail elections, I think this is going to even be more important to have an identifier on there, because let's talk about Gwen's house. If, we've got 10 being mailed to your house, we want to make sure that the person who's voting that ballot is really that person. And to me, that would be even more important to have the identifier on there if at some point down the road, the municipality decides to go to an all-mail. So I'm just thinking in the future as well, but
I think it's already in the code for a by-mail election.
it is.
Yes.
An identifier?
Yes. It's different in the by-mail election code than it is in the other code.
Well, that's even a more reason for what Barbara was saying, to make it, consistent between all elections versus, you want to have the voter have the same thing to fill out every time and not go, this is something I shouldn't fill out because it's this election versus,
Well, it makes our job easier if it's consistent, too.
What hit me is when we have the canvas, people can say, this person shouldn't have voted. I mean, it's one thing that it allows. Fortunately, we haven't come across that. So if we have that they must sign it, they haven't, and someone comes to the canvas and says, well, you can't count that vote, then it should just be specified what we are specifically
we have no code to go back to, though.
How many envelopes do we have with the word bus in?
We just ordered about $6,000 worth of new envelopes right before this election.
So what say we review this when we run out of envelopes?
How hard is it to change the code, to add, to insert, just to reword it, just have it reworded to cover it?
Well,
In theory, 3 weeks.
And we've spent, what, the last 20 months, going through all this stuff?
Yeah.
This has been a long time to get it to this point, and it's so much better.
I think it would be a lot easier from my perspective, Dennis, but maybe not to get it through because it's already in the by mail one.
Sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I mean, if it wasn't controversial when that went through, I can't imagine it would be with this, but I don't know.
Well, and
that also went
I would
through.
say that requiring at least one identifier is attractive because makes it much easier to administer, and it avoids putting you guys in the position of trying to decide whether the signatures are close enough. That would be very, very appealing. And the number that would be rejected because there's no identifier would be very small, right? In this case, 6 out of this year. And what was our turnout?
23.49%.
So, what are the law of averages if you double the turnout? 12 ballots. So that's very attractive.
You need an identifier for the question ballot. You need it for the absentee person, don't you?
Mm-hmm. And you need it on the application. So it's just
And the fax, same way?
on this one, you need it twice is the only difference between all those.
Okay. Okay. Do we want to pursue that then? I think that's the question right now of making that official,
And by official, you mean making a recommendation to?
making a recommendation to write that in code. That's what we're talking about right now.
Identifier is required on the ballot envelope.
so that the
In
code
addition
matches
to
that.
the signature and the witness, because you're saying it's not specified what execute means?
If you want me to clean that up and make that more clear, that executing is execute by placing their signature,
I think that would be wonderful.
you can do that.
Okay.
Isn't that generally a legal definition of execute?
That's why I said in this context, execute means the signature, not the signature and identifiers, but I can certainly add in execute the certificate by signature.
So could you clarify what you're recommending?
I make a recommendation that we clarify the code to include one identifier be required, as well as under a definition or defining what execute means, and that there be a signature, and were we going to say a witness?
That's already separately called for. So
It is, okay. So a signature and an identifier.
Okay. Is there any discussion on that?
Is that a motion?
Is that a motion?
Yes, it's a motion.
Second.
Is there any discussion on that?
I think we had discussion.
All right, all those in favor of this motion, raise your hand. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Let's go to number 2, Data Processing Review Board. I think that's yours, isn't it, Vicki?
I shared it with 4 of you two, the 2 officers in here, my concern when I discovered that there was no longer a data processing review board. when I worked here, they were integral to and independent of the clerk's office and reviewing and testing ballots maybe 2 weeks before the election and during the election. So, and since then, I think that Gwen has told me that there's now a AccuVote review board. Is it named?
That's what it was. Perhaps you could.
AccuVote testing board.
Right.
Yes.
Perhaps you could. Go ahead. Are you
I
done?
would like to understand what that is. I guess that's what I'm saying.
So in 2010, the Data Processing Review Board and the AccuVote Testing Board were combined to be one board. So we did not get rid of the Data Processing Review Board. A lot of the review that they did is now included in the review that the AccuVote Testing Board does. So we do have a board that comes in and they test the ballots and they test the database to ensure that all of the cards and ballots and machines are running. So it's essentially what the two separate boards did independently of each other. We have one board that now does together.
And forgive me for going back 10 years.
Yeah.
But we just had the Data Processing Review Board. We didn't have an AccuVote.
Okay. So my understanding, and I will be, I mean, I've only been here since 2010, so I've only been here since we've had the two boards combined into one. But in the review of what I have seen at the Data Processing Review Board, what they did, the AccuVote Testing Board now also does that work.
So as best you can tell, there's no function previously performed by the Data Board that's not being done now.
And my understanding is that is correct.
So then the only other question might be, and I don't know that we'll have a quick answer, but is there some other protocol or test that we should do that we haven't done before?
And
I don't know, for example, what is there something the state does when they're running a general election that we don't do and should consider?
And I have spent some time the last couple of years reviewing this, specifically because there has been conversation within the community about the Data Processing Review Board. I've heard some conversations regarding getting rid of the board, and so I have tried to understand specifically what they did differently than what our board is doing. And I have talked to some members of the community that I know that are involved with IT. I've talked to previous members of the board, and I am trying to determine if there is some additional tests that we could do that we aren't already doing to ensure the integrity of our election. And it's something that's really important to me. I've tried to, in any area that there's been community concern about the integrity of our election, I've tried to make changes. Specifically, we changed the security seals that we use on the AccuVote board, or on the AccuVote machines, because we got a lot of feedback after the 2012 elections that those were plastic and flimsy and sometimes could break. So we replaced those with a heavy-duty wire thing that can only be removed with wire cutters. So it is something that we have spent in the clerk's office some time reviewing, and it's something that we continue to look at national elections, what people do as far as testing and stuff. And so we are trying to determine if there is something additional that we can do, and we are open to exploring those options and open to adding additional review. And
I also have sat on the state's AccuVote Review Board, and it was not, in my opinion, 10 years ago, as vigorous as the Data Processing Review. Because the Data Processing Review Board were very independent of the clerk's office. So who makes up the tests? I mean, who formulates the test that you put the cards through, or our vote, as I keep repeating myself 150 times, our elections are much more complicated, I think, than the state's.
Absolutely. We use testing log that is provided by the company that provides our services. So we use Dominion Voting, and they...
Dominion?
Mm-hmm.
Is that Diebold, or is it just new now?
Dominion there's been some changes over the years with the company that we use. Just they've been acquired by other companies and stuff, but it's Dominion Voting. We are using Irene, who has worked with Anchorage for maybe 10 years. She's been coming up here, so she's really familiar with our elections, which is really helpful. As we went through in 2013, we had to create a brand new database, and we had to create all of the different splits and all the different ballot styles and stuff like that. So it's helpful to have Irene because she has this sort of long view history of our elections here.
And how you're kind of, I don't want to use the word double vote, but I've already said, you know, the precincts that have oversight on bonds versus approving their own taxation for said bond. You know,
The
that's
shadow
kind of-
races?
Yeah.
So what Vicki is talking about is Anchorage Municipal Code requires everyone to vote on the bonds because it is the full faith and credit of the municipality. But if you live within the service area, so specifically our fire service area, our park service areas, our road service areas, and our police service area, you vote on it. And then if you're outside the service area, you also vote on that bond, but you vote on it separately. And in order for any of our bonds to pass, both the inside vote and the outside vote have to pass. So when you look at the election results, you'll see that there's two, for all of the bonds that are service-specific bonds, there's two little areas. And so we have to go into the database and create all those splits in those areas where there's a small part of fire service area within this precinct. The rest of it's outside the fire service area. So those folks that live in that little area vote differently. And this is what causes us to have all of the different ballot styles. We had 42 ballot styles this year. So, and that is specifically one of the things that the AccuVote testing board does. They go through and they look at each precinct and what ballots that precinct will receive, and they test all those ballots. So they are testing to make sure that each memory card has loaded onto the card all the correct ballots that it should have.
As well as the splits.
Well, that is the
Yeah.
splits. Those
Right.
separate ballot styles are the splits.
And they're pre-marked so that you know what the total should be.
Yes.
If I could add again to the general knowledge. I was head of that AccuVote testing board for a number of years. And I think it was 4 years ago, well, before, we would take every single card and hand mark every possible outcome of the races on every precinct. And then we'd run them through every machine. And I believe my last year they switched to having pre-printed, right, which is wonderful. It also eliminates error,
Human error.
human error, to have them pre-printed. It costs a little more, but I think it's well worth it.
You mean have
The cards, a test deck. And both of them, though, they run them through every single machine. And then they run the tapes off. They first run a zero tape, and then they run a tape that shows all of these different possibilities. And it's very easy to tell on the tape just from patterns, looking at patterns of numbers, whether it's accurate or not. And anything that is not is sent back, presumably to Amanda still, to have the card reprogrammed. And then they check the paper and the ink, and then they put it back on the zero and the date and time, and then they lock it. And it's not opened again until after the election. So they check the mechanics of it, but they also check that each one of those cards is properly programmed to run the race correctly.
And then I have a question. Are any of the candidates notified when this is happening?
No.
Okay, well, in Minnesota, we were required by law to notify the political parties when it was a partisan election, or we were required to notify the candidates, which meant that they could come and observe the process. And I think that really helped with the comfortability, or whatever word you want to call it, with them knowing that that's what it is. So if we don't do that, I would suggest that we do that. And I know, depending on the election, when I was director of elections in Minneapolis, there were people that would show up while we were doing that. and they would ask questions, and then they'd walk and they'd go, oh,
Yeah.
I get it now. You know, so I think it's a good idea to send a letter out to all the candidates saying, here's the date and the time, and we're going to be doing it, you know, all day or however long it takes, because we had to do the whole thing. I had 182 precincts, and we used to have to go through them all. So,
What candidates are you specifically addressing? The assembly candidates or the limited road service area?
anyone that's on the ballot would get a letter stating that, you know, we are doing our testing, and you're welcome to come and observe, so that we're verifying that the votes are correctly programmed the way they should be, so that they come out on the ballot and so forth. And also we were required to publish it in the newspaper, so that if anybody else wanted to show up, they were welcome to.
That
I
would
think-
be in very good keeping with our policy. Remember the last year, the recommendation that we had was to increase voter understanding of the whole process, and there's so many processes that most people have no idea of. That would enhance that, I believe.
Does that sound easy enough from a legal point of view? Without getting in
From a
there?
legal one, sure. Yeah, I don't, you know, if you want, you can notice your meeting, or notice if it's something that takes place over a couple of days, you can notice that that's the case, and it's going to start at 8 on this day and continue until completed. You can have the assembly announce it at a public meeting. When does the board now currently meet?
We usually get our test decks towards the end of February. So we usually test like the February, that last week of February. It usually takes about 3 or 4 days.
Makes sense. Yeah.
What is your thoughts on that? Is that pretty feasible?
I am interested in exploring that. I think that it's something that we could do as policy. It wouldn't need something that would need to be codified.
I agree with that.
I really have, I have a little bit of hesitation. You remember the Florida incident in the presidential election some years ago, and watched all that machinations that went on. I have a little bit of problem with, I don't know who Dominion is, but I have a little bit of problem with the vendor preparing the test deck, and I assume it's at your instruction.
Vendor does not prepare the test deck. The ballot printer prepares the test deck. So it's separate. The vendor...
Who's the ballot printer?
We use Printworks out of Homer, Alaska.
Oh, good.
It's also checked. The deck is checked to make sure it's accurate.
And there is a way then to be sure that it's printed right. Because, if you had a printed problem, boy, all hell would break loose. And it could happen very easily without, you wouldn't know unless you had tests. And it would be nice to be able to present your test data if there was ever a problem. And I don't suspect, I don't think anybody, these are all mistakes. They're not intentional
And so,
manipulations.
And just for everyone's information, we do maintain the test, as Gwen stated, that we print a zero report tape and then we print the results tape after we run the test deck. And we also have a check sheet that our board fills out for each machine, and we keep that as part of our election results up until when all the election supplies are shredded about 30 days after the election is certified. So that is held on to, and so if there was any concern with the validity of a machine, we could always go back and review those materials.
Thank you.
This is just an aside from last year. We had people coming and complaining about the AccuVote, and they had no idea that this thorough process was going on. So I don't know how, maybe articles of interest in the new paper on the election.
And was it not last year, not this time around, but last year, there was a lot of swearing with AccuVote machines, and how safe are they? And people were throwing out all kinds of examples, saying, well, something happened in Florida, and something happened here, and so on. And I tried to chase some of those as best I could with the time that I had. And a lot of those had to deal with issues regarding machines we weren't even using.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of work to be done, I think.
That's why we tried to, in our recommendation of that year, we tried to include that in our recommendation, but I think the wording just went over, because my husband and son are in computers, and I asked him all of this stuff, and I got that guy on the hot seat. So
Because we're next to each other.
yeah, so I looked all of that stuff up too, but this is a standalone computer. It's not hooked to the internet, it's not anything like that, and it only has access by the administrator and I think one other observer or something like that, so it's very secure.
Well, and that's something that we did change in code last year when we worked on the revisions, is we did require another person, and it is either somebody from the IT department of the municipality, someone from Department of Law, or
Internal audit.
or internal audit. There was like 3 places, and so this year we did have a representative from the IT department on election night as we were uploading the results, along with the clerk's office and our Dominion voting representative. So,
Madam Chair, I have to excuse
Yes.
myself. I have another meeting after.
All right, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
I have one question of you, Amanda. I think you alluded to it, but we have had a lot of people asking if they spot check the night of the elections on those. Is that something you're looking into? It's not in place at the moment.
yes, that's correct. But
Okay.
that's one of the things that we are trying to find a way to implement that again. So,
Okay.
And spot check by,
Hand count.
do a hand count.
oh, okay.
Random
Wasn't sure what you
precincts
meant by
and
that.
random races.
Okay.
So we have had the conversation for 2 years now, and so we're still working on that.
Yeah. Okay, do we need to do a recommendation on anything we've discussed on this?
I think I have these notes, and I think that that's something that the clerk's office can incorporate. I think that we're happy to do that.
Okay,
So.
does that satisfy you?
Oh, yeah. I'm pleased to hear you say hand count, because always the hand count, people doing the hand count were wrong and the machines were right. But, you know, I mean, it's just, it makes you feel good if you take a periodic. You don't have to do a lot. It's
Yeah. And so far with my experience in the clerk's office, we have done a hand count of all the races of West Anchorage, ballots in West Anchorage, and we had some with the 2012 election. We had a recount of 15 precincts. So we have worked on establishing some good protocols for that, and so we do hope to incorporate that into election night.
And I think one of the things is too, once there's the big fiasco, I wasn't on the board then,
Yeah.
on this board, but once there's a fiasco, it's really hard to get back in and have the public have a feeling of that everything is above board, everything is being taken care of, you know, that it's all set and so forth. So I think anything that can move in that direction is probably really good.
Yeah.
Just like I said, with what we were required to do, but you know, notice, hey, show up if you want, see
Yeah.
what we do.
I think we have embraced that and tried to make
Oh yes,
changes,
definitely,
but-
definitely.
Amanda, I noticed there were more things in the paper, and that maybe get some of the local people on radio to interview, so that you're just getting out more than one way, because I can't believe anything really being bad in these elections. People are so thorough. It was when I worked in the election polls. So when they go off back east, I think, well, I don't know what they're doing. They're way ahead of them.
We do send out a series of press releases throughout the whole election cycle, and we actually, we do a random drawing for the candidate's name order on the ballot, and we had both the Alaska Dispatch and the Anchorage Daily News came out and did a story on that. So we will continue to communicate with the media about some of these specific things that we do to prepare for the elections. So.
I was just suggesting you maybe throw radio in too.
Yeah.
I mean, just any.
Yeah. No, I worked closely with Daisha on a lot of different
I know
things
you
when she was
have.
here, but we will. It goes out to everyone when we send out the press releases. Not everyone picks up the story, though.
Right.
So.
Alrighty, we're going to move on to number 3, the 2014 election wrap-up. What does that include?
I think if you just had a round table, if anyone had any other ideas, thoughts, on this year's election.
Especially things that you liked or things
Or
that you
didn't
felt
like,
that
or-
we could make improvements on?
I want to say more room.
I would love that too. I always joke that I become a glorified mover during the election cycle because we just move the furniture all over
Oh.
City Hall
Yeah.
over and over and over again.
I suppose there's no hope of moving the election itself back up to the clerk's office, huh?
Oh, the voting.
Yeah.
Have you been in the clerk's office lately? We've rearranged that whole.
Remodeled
we don't
even.
have any space in there either. I mean,
Yeah,
And for the
that
public-
first room.
Yeah, for the public, it's much easier where it is. I mean, we suffer, but for the public, I think it's really good where it is.
we've gotten a lot of feedback on that over the last couple of years, and specifically our goal of being more in line with the state's elections. It's really confusing for the public to vote down there in the fall and then to come up to the clerk's office in the spring, and so it's just more consistent. It's easier to find. So.
Thank you for our supplies. I feel like they've made it livable, even in that small space.
Yeah. And if there's other things that we can purchase, we are happy to do that. We bought a couple carts the first year, and then we bought a couple more. Now we have a whole
String of them.
But they're
But
so
they're-
fantastic.
yes.
We use them just on and off throughout the election cycle. We just keep loading them, unloading them. So
And if you can put up with our whining, we can deal with it. But we have to whine.
And also, could we invite, is there some way we can encourage the election committee of the assembly to kind of see what we're talking about now about, I know, you probably apprise them of all these things, but they don't seem to
Get
catch
the
on. They're so
picture.
busy usually with their own election.
that's a really good idea. After this year's election, the assembly reorganized, and Patrick Flynn is the chair of the assembly now. Dick Trainey is the vice chair, and Ernie Hall is now the chair of the ethics and election committee. And so, Ernie Hall's worked closely with us over the years with the 2012 election, and he also, worked on and off as we did the revisions. So I'm sure that we could communicate to him to come and sort of see the space limitations and the challenges that we have because of that, just so he is aware. And I think next year is a perfect opportunity because it is a mayoral election, and so it is an easier time for the assembly members to potentially be involved in seeing what's going on. It's a little bit harder sometimes when they are on the ballot as candidates. So
Because I cringe every time one of them says we only have one split now.
We only have one what?
Split.
there's only the one assembly split, and but I have spent a lot of time this past year. I had a work session with the assembly, and I brought my maps. I love maps, and I went through and I showed them all of the splits, and we had a robust conversation about it. And they are definitely interested in continuing the conversation about the splits and the challenges that they cause.
Encourage them to have the LRSAs voted by mail.
I'm not sure that would make it better, because then we'd be running 36 little elections versus one big complicated election. Because we would still have to run those separate elections. So we're continuing to look for ways to address that, but I'm not convinced that's the way to go. So,
We could combine the LRSAs into one like Eagle River is.
yeah.
That might be a help.
So.
Easier said than done, I've heard.
Yeah. So.
I want to make a comment that you have done an incredible job of making it run more smoothly. In this last election, everybody just knew what was going on. They stepped in. It just flowed much better. And we would like to thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. I'm really thankful to the Election Commission and everyone that works with us. I don't do it alone. I have Barbara supporting me, and this year it was really great to have, Bonnie, Joshua, Emily all helped throughout the election,
wonderful.
and Pat. So it's always the team effort, and then a lot of support from the Election Commission too. So thank you.
I want to commend the Election Commission. I just think we really did a really good job and it was very efficient. We got done sooner than normal, and hats off to you guys.
Twice as many ballots by mail this year than last year.
Wow.
And we also saw significant increases in the absentee in-person voting too. So this commission handled more ballots this year than last year, and also, as Gwen said, in a shorter amount of time. So it was really, really good work.
I have a question that would be number 4 that I probably should have let somebody know. But there was talk about a municipal issue is going to be on the ballot in November. How does that involve us?
That's a good question.
So we are kind of in a wait and see as far as AO37, the referendum on AO37, and as soon as we have clear direction, we will communicate that to the Election Commission. But we are still waiting to hear exactly what's going to happen with that and what it's going to look like. So we will be communicating with the Election Commission as we have more information.
So basically, if it is going to be on the ballot, you don't know if there would be an involvement by us or not. It depends on how it's going to be administered.
I don't know the answer to that. I don't know if it's going to be on the ballot. I don't know if we're going to be running a separate election. I don't know what it's going to look like at all. So I don't know anything. And when I learn something, I will communicate that to the
Refer
commission.
to this is from Gail. Sorry.
Vanumia.
Yeah, we got this in January, and it's pretty good to understand that they don't want to do it.
Yes, I guess.
She
She came up with a million reasons why they don't want to do it, yeah.
I have a concern about the observers. This is the first time that I've worked with him with the election process, verification and all that stuff, when they're right over your shoulder all the time. And there was a couple of them that were coughing and snorting and all of that, and I was one person on the commission that ended up getting a nice, wonderful cold, and I didn't appreciate that, and I don't know if there's any way to control that, or at least suggest to any of the observers, if you have a cold, please don't get somebody else to get to your place, because we worked really hard. The first day we set up our room, we scrubbed the tables, we tried to sanitize the whole room as much as possible, and then have people come in there and start coughing and snorting, and everything was just counterintuitive, as far as I'm concerned. But it went fairly well, all things considered, and you had never done it before, so it was all new to you also. And it was before we had a roped off thing like in a bank, so they couldn't come any closer than that. And to have them just right over your shoulder was different. So.
You were lucky not to have been here last year.
Yeah.
One day I wanted to count how many times I said, "Excuse me."
Yeah.
To just try to put something, in a basket that was a little ways away. How many times you said, "Excuse me," to get to that basket?
I felt there was a different tone this year, which I appreciated. Instead of being suspicious, it felt like they were appreciative and
I
stuff.
think that was a lot due to Amanda and Barbara. I think you set the tone for that more.
But I had one issue with one person. I had a hard time because there were so many exchanges. And an easy, brief question is fine.
Yeah.
But to have it go back and forth 6 or 7 times, in my opinion, get out of my face.
Yeah.
That a couple of times got to me. So I don't know if there's further, I don't know what we could do about that.
I think that you can always communicate to anyone in the public who's asking multiple questions to take those up with Barbara and I. And we really made an effort this year to have one of us down there at all times when we had observers. And if we didn't have observers, to at least have Bonnie down there, because it is just helpful to have sort of a person to go between. But I think if you're comfortable to always just refer those questions to Barbara or I, so that you can continue our work and we can try and address them. Because I do know how that happens. It's like you answer one question and then that leads to a whole other series of questions.
Your complete train of thought.
What I found was that they were trying to give me suggestions on what to do next, kind of, or how to handle the situation. And I think in my inexperience, I would sit there and listen to them, and and then it was like, wait, no, what am I doing?
That's the difficult part, because sometimes the information they have is very valuable, and it's really worth our while to do it. And other times they don't know what they're doing, and it's hard,
And I saw both ways of that this year, where sometimes an observer would bring something up, and it was helpful because, you are right. Thank you for calling that to our attention. But then it also can get sucked down a rabbit hole, and 20 minutes later.
Yeah, the biggest problem is when it's argumentative or
I was just going to say that.
the tone. I agree. That is definitely something we can work on next year.
I would really love it if they had name tags. Where you could see what their name was and who they represented.
Okay.
That would help a lot in, even like what I was saying, where I kind of would get.
Didn't they have name tags?
They had name tags.
They had
Observer.
And then they had their name and who they were there for. Is that still being inexperienced and everything with it? I don't know how necessary that is, but I think
I think we could ask them to have their name. I'm not sure. We have them sign in who they're representing on the sheet, but I think it'd be really easy to ask them to have. And we did have the observer name tags, and we did have the little sticks.
Some of them put in their first names.
And so we'll just try and make sure that everyone does that next year.
Is that list that tells you who they're working for available for? I didn't know where that was.
Yeah, it was just it was out in the hall where Barbara and I were sitting as they were signing.
And that's something we can come in and look at and check out, because I think I felt like I wasn't really sure how much of that I had privilege to do.
Yeah, absolutely. All of that is open public information.
Okay.
So,
is there anything that anybody can think of that maybe a procedure that we do that we might want to, look into again?
This is real small, but I hate to give up my book.
you can take the items out of it.
I took a lot out of it.
And I just, in order to make a new one for next year,
You're just trying to be kind.
I'm just trying to not purchase new binders every year.
That's certainly understandable.
So you have our binders.
I have some folks left theirs.
So do you take everything out and start over again, or do you? Okay.
So, and I know last year that people took the white pages out of their book and just gave me back the binder, and that's fine. But we put together new binders every year for everyone.
Because I needed to review what we were supposed to do.
I cannot tell you these dividers with a pocket.
Yeah, I like
wonderful.
those.
Excellent addition. One thing I thought we could talk about is how, I don't even know how to explain it. Remember how we had Barbara and Vicki having to go through and double check and redo that? Is there some way we could start?
Do that on the front end rather than
Yes.
review.
I thought that the reason that it had to be redone is it had just gotten filed backwards originally.
Yeah.
So we can, maybe the clerk's office can make sure that I know we printed those posters this year. Maybe we can print some other posters that just have clear instructions as filing goes and stuff like that.
And it was, I can't remember exactly what we were doing, but something else we were filing, and to have done that at the time would have been a lot more complicated. But, it turned out that it was way more complicated for you guys to do it, so we should have bit the bullet. But
double work, but it worked out.
yeah.
Remember, were we going to do anything with these?
If you want to, now's the time.
I'm sorry, I don't want to keep everybody, but.
No, we're here. We're scheduled till 4:30.
Oh, really?
We are?
2:30 to 4:30 was
Because I-
wasn't it?
Or
did you amend
at
that?
3:30? So
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
but again, on page 1, 6, we're looking at absentee ballots, and we don't look at anybody's ballots.
Oh, yeah, you're
Small
right.
thing. Easy to correct.
Envelopes.
Yeah. There's duties. 6th item says absentee ballots, and I always like to have absentee envelopes.
Oh, yeah, we had talked about that.
Yep.
Envelope and see the ballot.
So if I take all this out,
It's in the latest
because you're going to
edition
put
of
something
that.
else in. Okay.
Or
Because
whatever
that,
that thing is
some of
called.
this I'd like to look at.
Guideline.
Yes.
What is that called?
Election Commission guidelines for canvas and
Yeah.
certification.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of good
This
stuff in
is the
there.
March one.
Yeah, that's it. What, page 6, you said?
It's page, no,
One.
number 6, page.
Oh,
Review questionable.
Number 6, which page?
Page 1,
Oh, number 6.
number 6 should be envelopes instead of ballots.
Because somebody could say, what are you doing opening your
Yep,
ballot?"
that's
You
fine.
know, So we just want to.
Anything else?
I've got a lot of notes here, but let me see what I do.
How did you want that to be?
If they're,
Put insert envelopes. before
After the
ballot.
word ballot.
If it's
Sorry.
clerical things, do you want to just submit that to
Yeah.
Amanda?
yeah, that's, if they're just small technical, or non-technical corrections.
This kind of answers what I think Vicki and I were doing on page 5. It says sort all question envelopes by voted precinct order. And I wrote down that we did it by the registered in precinct order.
What page is that on?
Page 5.
Number or letter?
1. Number 1 after election day.
Well, I mean, we could do this later, if we're not in any great hurry. I mean, if we
Right.
present these in a more formal.
That's fine, but I would like to get this one. What is,
It was number 1 on after, and what I wrote down is we did this by registered in precinct.
and that is what we should have done?
Yeah, that's how Vicki and I reordered it.
Okay.
Was by where they were registered rather than
Oh, yeah, that's a
voted
big
precinct.
mistake, yeah.
Okay, registered and
Sort all question absentee
So-
envelopes by
registered in
voter,
precinct.
Where they're registered, not where they voted.
not the voted precinct order, but the,
So we take out voted and put registered precinct instead?
I
Yes,
think so.
there we
Yes.
go.
that's an important change.
so it's
Yeah.
where
We're done.
they
It
are
took- it took you
registered, not
2.5
where they now
days.
reside.
Sort all
Yeah.
question envelopes
voted,
by
they
registered.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, yep, okay.
That's great.
Yeah.
That one, in my opinion, was the biggest snafu this year. Everything else I felt ran well.
I thought it went
More
real
time
smooth.
consuming than
Yeah.
we thought it was going to be.
Well, it gave you all something to do.
And we still got done faster. No, I don't know.
All righty.
Okay.
Well, is there any other member comments?
Well done.
Someone had mentioned about, like, if we could have a refresher on parliamentary procedure
Oh, that'd
at
be
some point,
lovely.
like at our meeting in January or something like that, so that we
Well, I
just
felt the need.
refresh.
I would be happy to put something together on that. I've done
Rules.
we had an assembly retreat last year, and I put together Robert's Rules of Jeopardy. It was really fun. So maybe we could do something like that. Or I'll put together a little cheat sheet for sure. That's easy.
Okay.
Awesome.
Not too complicated, because if you get into a rubber tree, it'll be real crazy.
Yeah.
Well, there's one point that I have a little bit of a problem with, and it came up in our meeting today, because we had a whole lot of discussion before we made the motion. But sometimes you don't know
How to do it.
how to make the motion yet until you have some discussion. So what do you do in a situation like that? If you're following Robert Rules of Order, you have to have that motion first. And then you end up with all these amendments upon amendments upon
Yeah.
amendments. That's the dilemma. So I think there's a little leeway there in using.
Some,
Well, maybe if we got the-
the.
If we got the skeleton of it, that would probably help.
Yeah, I'd be happy to put that
because
together.
I have never actually functioned in a meeting where they were strictly held, so I think that would be good just to kind of, I felt, I
Because
wasn't
if we
sure.
get into something contentious, they really come in handy,
Yeah.
Yeah, we're not going to do that.
Any other comments?
Are we going to go have a dinner together?
Yes.
Good.
I think I shall adjourn the meeting first, so
Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
We
Opposed?
usually have